So let's talk about Eberron Rising from the last war. So just a quick rundown on the setting itself. This is not going to be exhaustive by any means, but it'll give you an idea of what to expect from the setting if you are looking to get involved. So Eberron is a war-torn world filled with magic-fueled technology and lightning trains. The current state of the setting is the product of a magical catastrophe that happened called the Day of Mourning. And the art and the covers for the product itself reflect some of that. It exists in a crux where magic and science have created this magic-fueled technology. So it's more powered by the arcane, allowing them to do really tremendous things and create entirely new entities that were the product of this marriage between magic and science. Warforged is a popular product of that, so you've probably seen these very like golem-like, golem, not golem-like constructs that are called Warforged. They were the product of this era where science and arcane kind of meld together. They were built for a war and a very martial purpose. So they were originally created through this time during the war, and they now are kind of left with a bit of an existential crisis because the war is over, or the wars have ravaged the land and they've quelled somewhat. So now their primary purpose is left by the wayside. Many of the war-torn are trying to struggle to figure out where they exist and what their purpose is now in this new reality post-war in Eberron and the continent of Corvair, or the world over. We'll talk a little bit more about the content dynamics and the geography too. This setting is built around the keystone of Sharn. So Sharn is also known as the City of the Towers. It's a land of sprawling, vaulting skyscrapers, airships, and more of these war-ravaged vistas that exist in the game world. And like I said, it's set on the continent of Corvair following this vast destructive war, which was called the Last War. Corvair itself is one of 6 continents in the world of Eberron. So it's a full multi-content setting, just like Forgotten Realms. So when you think about Eberron, I made the mistake earlier when I was learning about this of just thinking about it as like a very encapsulated setting, but it's not. It's a full multi-content world, just like Faerun or Toril, or Faerun has Toril, or Dragonlance, or any of those other popular settings. So like I said, Corvair is one of those 6 continents, but it does have its own cosmology, its own planes, and they orbit rather than exist in layers like we're used to hearing in the Forgotten Realms setting. So this cosmology of planes orbit around Eberron, and they yield different effects on the game world as they pass through their various cycles and surround and encircle the material plane of Eberron. Presumably there are other effects that you can see or would experience in the game world, and that might be coming down the line as they produce more officially published content for Eberron from Wizards. There exists in the world the dynamic of dragon marks and 13 dragon marked houses, which are, I'm going to use the word clans for lack of a better word. So the dragon marked houses are kind of like the political influences around the world in Eberron, and there are 13 of those houses that all play a part in the overarching resource materials or source materials. Another key element that is unique to Eberron are dragon shards, and these are actually crystalline resources that I believe are used to channel or manifest this arcane energy and use it to fuel this magical technology too. So there's a whole other mechanic around dragon shards that exists. I won't go too deeply into that. There's lots of information in the forthcoming Rising from the Last War, as well as the Wayfinder's Guide, which was released in July, I believe. There are some major differences between Eberron and what you might be useful in a traditional fantasy setting like Forgotten Realms. The classes are slightly different. The races and dynamics are all very different and have a different flair because of these geopolitical influences and the effect of dragon marks on players themselves. They all affect characters differently. A little bit of quick history. Eberron was created in and around 2002 by Keith Baker as part of a worldwide search for a new adventure setting that Wizards had petitioned the community for. Keith Baker submitted Eberron and ultimately won. So while Jeremy Crawford is the lead designer for Wizards of the Coast on Eberron Rising from the Last War, the concept of the game world and the actual early published materials were the product of Keith Baker and a number of other really talented individuals who worked to bring it to reality. We'll talk a little bit about that more as we go on too. It was originally announced in August. That's when they first kind of brought it to bear, and it was teased with a completely different cover. This new version comes completely ready for adventure out of the box with locations, adventures, settings, and maps. It's got a complete campaign in there as well. So it really is self-contained. It's got everything that you need to get into the world to understand it and start to play through some fun adventures in there. The pre-order for Eberron, which again launches on Tuesday, November 19th, according to Nathan Stewart on Spoilers and Swag this week, has broken all of their records for pre-sale books ever on Amazon in this iteration of Dungeons and Dragons. So it's actually broken all their records. Apparently, an awful lot of excitement, a lot of diehard fans for the Eberron setting as well. So looks pretty good. Wizards released a digital-only PDF version of an Eberron source material called Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron back in July, and it was released it was released much earlier. So the first question I had was, how does this live in or play in the same sandbox? So I got some answers to that for you. If you have picked up Wayfinder's Guide, or if you're wondering what the differences are yourself, these are some of the primary ones. So first of all, they do have updates coming for the digital version. So if you purchased Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron through D&D Beyond or through DM's Guild, your digital materials are going to be updated with some new components from the new release coming on Tuesday. So those updates will be pushed out to the digital versions of Wayfinder's Guide for you. They're intended to be updated on the same day as Rising from the Last War is released, which is Tuesday, like I said. And all updated changes in official stats, abilities, everything that's mechanically oriented should be updated. So anything that affects like player stats, roles, abilities, feats, things like that, those should all be updated when the new version launches for you if you've already purchased Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron. The new digital version of the Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron will come with the Artificer class. The only caveat is it's only going to be updated with one official subclass for that class set. Now, the Rising from the Last War compendium in completion will have 3 subclasses. So if you want access to the other 2 subclasses, you want to grab the new issue, the new release of Rising from the Last War, the Eberron source materials coming out on Tuesday. Other core differences that exist between Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron and Rising from the Last War include, basically the Wayfinder's Guide is more of like a lore book and a guide for the setting, whereas Rising from the Last War is really a campaign source book. So it's closer in kind to some of these large, like let's say Curse of Strahd, for example, which is both lore, background, setting, and mechanics for an environment, but also comes with a pretty robust adventure to play through as well. So that's one big difference. Rising from the Last War also has more updated stats, races, and abilities, so it's more of a complete resource for the world setting. There are 5 playable races in Wayfinder's Guide versus 8 playable races that are coming with Rising from the Last War. As I mentioned, there's only 1 subclass available for Artificer in Wayfinder's Guide versus the 3 that come shipped with Rising from the Last War. And there are a few other changes to magic items and 2 feats that exist between the 2. So overall, if you haven't gotten involved yet, I would probably hold off and grab Eberron Rising from the Last War on Tuesday. If you have already picked up Wayfinder's Guide, then it's really to your discretion. If you want those extra things and it's not going to kill you to bite the bullet and spend another $50-$60 on a new source book, then it might be worth your while. But otherwise, if you've got Wayfinder's Guide and you've been into that, you're probably going to get most of the good stuff, with the exception of some of the other class options and, of course, that adventure that comes out of the box. There are a lot of really great gameplay additions in the compendium that are coming for the Eberron setting. So there's a group patron, which is basically a backstory for your group. There, obviously, you can have your backstory for your character, but Eberron Rising from the Last War is going to come with the backstory options for the entire group, which is kind of a neat touch. Especially if you're comfortable with kind of having the group really kind of dive into it together, rather than the whole you meet in a tavern and everybody comes in from their own channels and avenues. This assumes, I guess, that the player group has some kind of history together, which is going to be an interesting dynamic to see how they bring it in. It is the adventure that's set in Sharn is a first level adventure. So it's going to start with that first level adventure set in Sharn, the City of Towers. It's going to take you throughout the world. There's some key components of the world, or the continent of Corvair, I should say. Keep in mind that all this is centralized around Corvair, that one continent, which I guess is going to give them a lot of breathing room to come out with future materials down the road and continue to develop into the Eberron space, which I think is very clear this is intended to do. So we're going to see a lot more coming from Eberron, certainly. There are 16 new character race and sub-race options, so tons of customization options that are specific to the world of Eberron. And keep in mind, everything that you see in here is officially published material, so it is transferable. If you see something here that you like and you want to bring it into your world of Faerun or Ravenloft or what have you, you're more than capable of doing that. Just as a DM, you'll have to figure out some crafty way to make it available, but systematically they are transferable. So anything you get here is considered official play material and should be allowed in any D&D setting, of course at the discretion of your game master or dungeon master. It comes with the official release of the Artificer class, if I haven't mentioned that already, which is a class that's really based on melding that magic and science to create technology and new arcane items that really is a hallmark of the Eberron setting. The Mournland environment, which is the area where this great arcanic catalyst happened that really was the breaking of the world, in Moorland, which is a mist-shrouded, corpse-filled wasteland. It's been twisted by magic. There are 12 dragon marks, and that includes the aberrant dragon marks that we talked about earlier. So these dragon marks affect your character, and they affect how they employ with the game, its setting, its various houses and influences. And there's also a new background called the House Agent background, which I assume ties back into these dragon-marked houses. There are 11 group patrons. So those group patrons that we mentioned, the backstory for the whole group, there are 11 official options that are coming with the compendium. Just under 100 pages of adventure seeds and maps for Corvair. So it's coming with a lot of really great, robust map work, cartography, adventure seeds and hooks, plot points, lots of things to get you well ingrained into the world as an adventurer or a dungeon master. Exciting things there. So the actual adventure that's included is called Forgotten Relics, which is included for you to play through. So you're getting an adventure and a compendium, which is a nice touch. Roughly 38 monsters and NPCs. Lots of new content coming that, again, you can transfer into anything you want in your game. 38 new monsters and NPC items, all new magic items, of course, all new art. And just to wrap that up, finally, there's currently a 20% off sale on Dungeon Masters Guild for all Eberron third-party content. So if you are interested in kind of taking a peek around, or if you want to grab something up on the cheap, now's the time to do it. Everything Eberron on DM's Guild up there for 20% off, including Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron, which I would probably take a pass on at this point. Although it is $15 versus $50, so it might be a good fit for some.